It's cool now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So there's the tree again, and you see fluency there. It's one of the critical building blocks. Fluent reading feels and sounds pretty much the same as conversation. And so that allows a reader to make connections between what the reader's hearing, listening vocabulary, and the written text. So it builds comprehension. When you read fluently, you can concentrate on understanding what you're reading rather than on the smaller pieces of the language. The more you read, the more fluent you become. Some students learn to read fluently without explicit instruction, especially those who are experienced in reading fluently in another language. But for others, fluency does not develop naturally. They continue to read word by word and need to be encouraged to read in phrases. While the word fluency refers to both oral and silent reading, you can tell more about how your student's doing in fluency skills when they're reading aloud, of course. So it's by practicing oral reading that we teach fluency. In this topic, we're going to help you learn about the skills needed to become a fluent reader, how you can select fluency materials for your student, who needs fluency instruction the most, and some strategies to use for improving fluency, also where fluency instruction belongs in a lesson.
So, reading fluency has three components: speed, accuracy, and expressiveness. When reading aloud, fluent readers read in phrases and add expression and intonation. Stress, rhythm, and intonation are all parts of expressiveness. When someone reads aloud fluently, it sounds very much like ordinary speech. Fluency improves comprehension in two ways. First, fluent readers recognize words automatically without thinking about them. This allows them to focus on comprehension. Secondly, fluent readers create proper emphasis, rhythm, and inflection, which are not apparent in printed text. The end result is improved comprehension. Reading aloud makes it easy for students to hear themselves getting better. This increases their self-confidence as readers and makes reading much more enjoyable. So, one of the techniques is something called guided oral reading. It's repetitive reading with guidance from a teacher or a coach. That's you. Research shows these techniques are the best way to improve fluency. With these techniques, the tutor supports the student in a variety of ways to help them become more fluent. I'm going to give you a moment to read the slide. Now, remember when you had little kids at home and they wanted you to read the same story over and over and over again? That repetition was very important to kids. And it can be okay with adults, but you don't want to do it too long. You want to challenge them. So repetition can equal practice, but it will lead to fluency. So remember, repetition, 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 but always increasing that goal just a little bit.
We're going to take a look at 4 techniques to give you an idea of what you can do to help your student become a fluent reader. We're going to show you modeled reading, echo reading, choral reading, and duet reading. Okay, modeled reading first. This is just basically reading aloud. When parents read to their children, they're modeling reading. To practice modeled reading in your lessons, follow these steps. I'll give you a minute to look at them. Students should have a copy of what you're reading so they can follow along with their eyes and maybe with their fingers too. The text can be at a slightly higher level than you would normally use, but students still need to be able to follow along easily. In addition to reading aloud during your lesson, you can also record yourself reading. So your student can, with a copy of the text at home, practice listening and following along outside of class. You can send it to them via WhatsApp or in a text or an email. Modeled reading teaches word recognition in a meaningful context. It demonstrates correct phrasing. It gives students practice tracking across the page. That sounds like something that they would be able to do automatically, but for non-readers, tracking across the page is an important skill in itself. Echo reading. Let's look at how a tutor uses this technique with a basic literacy learner. And I need to start this a little further in because the first part won't be interesting to you. So let's see. There.
Recorded reading. You'll now watch a learner and a tutor practicing 2 guided, repeated oral reading strategies at the same time. Echo reading, in which the tutor models reading a passage and the learner repeats the passage, and cross-generational reading, where the learner prepares to read to a child. Echo reading is particularly effective for improving a reader's phrasing and expression. Any text can be used with this strategy, but since one of the learner's goals is to read to her granddaughter, this pair is using a children's book for this lesson. Unless your learner has a similar goal, you'll use materials of interest to adults.
This time's a little different from what we did, and you might love it. What we're going to do is called echo reading. And so an echo is like, I'll read it, and I'm modeling for you, just like when we do it together.
Okay.
But you're listening.
Okay.
And then you read it, and I'm listening. Okay. And then we'll just take turns. So we're going to each read the same sentence and then move on. And we'll do that 3 times, and then you'll try it on your own straight through. Okay? So this time's my turn. You're just listening. Then you're going to follow right after me and read the same sentence. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important. Your turn.
Oh, Grandpa, I thought you was going to read the whole page.
We're going to do it sentence by sentence.
Okay. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important.
So today I said, good morning to the first ant I saw.
So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw.
There were 600 more of them in line.
There were 600 more of them in line.
I stood there all day.
I stood there all day.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, let's try that again. Okay. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important.
Grandpa taught us good manners are important.
Very important.
Very important.
So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw.
So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw.
There were 600 more of them in line.
There were 600 more of them in line.
I stood there all day.
I stood there all day.
I love this book. Okay. I love Grandpa with his hat. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important.
Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important.
So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw.
So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw.
There were 600 more of them in line.
There were 600 more of them in line.
I stood there all day.
I stood there all day.
Okay. Does it feel easier than the first time?
Yeah.
Okay. It's cute, huh? All right. So this time you're going to read it straight through from top to bottom.
Okay. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important. So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw. There were 600 more of them in line. I stood there all day.
How does that one feel?
Good.
Yeah? Did you enjoy? I mean, that was fun. Just for me, it was fun. But do you think that was more helpful than the other 2 types we did, where you read to me and we read together?
I still like the first one better.
You still like the first one?
Yeah, this seems more competitive, or I'm not competitive, that's not a good word. It seems more redundant.
Oh, redundant. I can certainly see why, because then you're hearing it like twice as many times out loud. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good feedback. Okay. That's interesting.
It's important to practice each guided, repeated, oral reading strategy by having your learner read the passage out loud at least 3 times. Provide guidance for how to improve fluency by assisting your learner when needed and modeling accurate, well-paced reading with appropriate phrasing and expression. The goal is for your learner to read as fluently as she speaks. You've seen a tutor do quite a bit of talking when explaining a new strategy. During most lessons, you and your learner would be equally talkative.
Well, you probably noticed that various things about this video. You probably noticed that the tutor moved her finger along with the words to help the student read more fluently rather than word by word. Another way to do this, especially with longer sentences, is to break the sentence into phrases and move your finger in complete phrases. That helps with both fluency and comprehension because it makes sense of the sentence. So run your finger under several words at a time as you read and pause very briefly and move on to the next phrase. When you're doing this online, you'll have to use your cursor rather than a finger. And we learned just before we started this workshop last week that there's a setting on your computer that can make your cursor bigger. We were all very excited by that. So you can make your cursor bigger. Remember, we saw this when you were reading those phrases that were written in the Russian alphabet on the first night, and Carolyn used the cursor to break the sentences into phrases. Also notice the tutor varied the speed of her reading during the 3 guided readings. So the first one was slower, the middle one was middle, and the last one was a lot faster, getting a little faster each time, the way you would really read a story aloud to somebody. And also note that she showed her student that she valued her student's input by asking her which of the fluency activities she liked the best. So this is just kind of a review of echo reading, a summary of it. You can take a minute to review these steps, but you will have copies of our slides to look at after the workshop's over. And also, if you want to use this technique with your student, you'll have the summary slides to look at while you're doing that. You can practice echo reading with your student on WhatsApp or on the phone. It doesn't work so well with Zoom since more than one person talking at a time doesn't work well with Zoom. And each of you can trace the words as you're reading together face to face. You can trace the phrasing for them. You can also record yourself reading the material and send it to your student to practice outside of class. That's another possibility. Choral reading is similar. It's reading aloud in unison with students. Because your student is reading with you, the passage should be at the student's independent reading level. You don't want to challenge them with advanced material during this. During choral reading, when the student is reading confidently, you can stop reading and listen. If your student stumbles over a word, you can quickly provide it and then start reading aloud with them again. You can have a look at the steps for choral reading. In choral reading, don't ask any comprehension questions. You want the student to focus on improving fluency, not reading for comprehension. So if they can keep up with you and read fairly fluently, you can talk about what the passage meant later on, but not while you're doing it. Again, you can do this on your student, with your student, on WhatsApp or by phone. And what materials do you want to use? You might use part of a reading passage from the student's current lesson. Maybe, or probably, you want to practice these techniques at the end of the lesson after your student has become familiar with the text and understands it all. Later in the training, when we go over the language experience approach, where your student provides the text themselves, you'll see that you can also use these for fluency practice. So there's information in your handouts on using the echo reading, modeled reading, and choral reading techniques.
I'm going to talk about duet reading. It almost sounds like we should be at the Weinberg, doesn't it? Choral and duet. But anyway, the fourth technique, duet reading, is a little different because it uses text that's new to the student. It helps students improve fluency and vocabulary by developing the ability to recognize words automatically rather than focusing on decoding. It helps students read faster and with more confidence. In duet reading, the tutor and the student read at the same time, which is similar to choral reading, but not quite the same. It can be used with students who have some reading ability, who are reading hesitantly, word by word, or with no expression. We're going to do some duet reading together and then talk about what we've done, but we're really not going to do it together because Zoom doesn't allow us to do so. However, in a moment, we're going to show you the next slide, and you're going to start to read along with me, starting with the title, as soon as we display this slide, but we're not going to do it quite yet. Catherine's going to wait a moment. So I don't want you to try to study or analyze the text when you see it. I want you to just start reading. I will use the pointer to follow along the text instead of a finger as you would do with a student in person. Don't get discouraged if you can't keep up. Just come along for the ride and jump back in when you can. So now let's read. Please mute yourself because again, Zoom doesn't work well for this more than one voice at a time. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Beth. And I'm not
Oh, it's Catherine, but I'll do it.
I'm sorry, Catherine. Wrong person helping me.
I am. I will do it.
Okay, and can you move the cursor for me when I read since I didn't go into sharing?
Yep.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay, Katie, 17, says, my friend's mother doesn't like
Wait a
me.
minute. There's a first paragraph there.
Oh, it's not showing up on my, can you feel how someone feels about you reading body language? And authorities claim you can, from the look of scorn, however fleeting, to the subtle nods and bright eyes that say someone is receptive to your thoughts. Katie, 17, says, my friend's mother doesn't like me. I know she doesn't. I asked Katie why she thought this. Well, for one thing, she doesn't look at me when I talk to her, Katie explained. She looks away towards the door or across the room as though she wants to escape. And sometimes she looks at me as if to say, you look funny in those clothes. I guess it's the way her eyes look cold and her lips are pressed together. She doesn't need to say one negative word to me. The mother's body language has sent a message loud and clear. So, how did you feel about that exercise? Maybe a bit confused or frustrated? How did you feel as you were trying to keep up? Was it helpful to know ahead of time that it was okay not to be able to keep up? It takes a lot of concentration. You really can't pay attention to what you're reading. You want to put some thoughts down on chat for us? Great. Okay. Of course, when you do this with your student, you're going to be used correctly spelled material. But this gives you an idea of what it's like from the student's perspective. Absolutely awful. Importantly, you could probably tell that you improved as you went along. Next, we're going to look at the technique for duet reading. In duet reading, you select a passage on a topic that is of an interest to the student and is a couple of levels above the student's reading level, but not so difficult that the student becomes frustrated. You might want to give a fairly introductory person something from the newspaper ads from Target, a description of an item from Target. A more advanced student, maybe something from People magazine, that kind of thing. Something that might interest them. So unlike the other fluency exercises, it's very important to use something the student has not read before, as the purpose of this exercise is to push the student a little, kind of like resistance training with weights to build more muscle. Tell the student it's okay if they can't always keep up and that you're not going to ask them any questions. The purpose is to recognize words quickly and try to keep up. You're teaching the student to use those developing reading skills to attack unknown material. So you're going to follow these steps to conduct a duet reading exercise. Begin by reading aloud together at a normal pace using expression. Move your finger from left to right if you're meeting face to face, or use your cursor if you're meeting online to help the student stay on track without losing their place. The student should move their own finger if you're reading from separate copies. You should continue to read at a normal rate, even if your student hesitates or a word or falls slightly behind. After a few sessions, your student will begin to look ahead at coming words to keep from falling behind and will keep up more easily. Unlike choral reading, where the tutor might stop reading to listen to a student who is reading confidently, in duet reading, the tutor will stop reading only if the student completely stops reading themselves. In that case, you should also stop, take a break, offer encouragement, and then start again. You might want to do this exercise for no more than 5 or 10 minutes. It's really exhausting. Don't ask the student to read the passage alone. If your student keeps up easily, use harder material the next time. If they have a lot of difficulty, select easier material. You want to provide an appropriate challenge, but not overwhelm your student. There's a description of duet reading in your tutor information book in the Fluency Activities handout. So, duet reading, these are the guided oral reading techniques we looked at for improving fluency. I'm going to give you a moment just to look at them again. As you get to know your student and their reading ability, you'll figure out which might work best with your lesson. As a variation, I like to read passages with my students, taking turns reading sentences. We use a passage they're already familiar with, and this can help them read a little bit faster than they would if they had to read it all by themselves. We have a good time doing this.
Okay, all those fluency activities that we just talked about take some time. The next two activities are shorter and snappier, and they're a lot of fun. They emphasize how emotion and meaning are conveyed in fluent reading. It's important to mix longer, more rigorous activities like the ones we just talked about with shorter activities and games. So mixing it up like this makes instruction more enjoyable. This is particularly good if your student's tired that day or if you've had a real slog through difficult material. Say it like you mean it. Show students how meaning changes depending upon what you emphasize when you read a sentence. The sentence in the box in the slide is a good one for this kind of activity. Depending on the emphasis, the seven-word sentence can have different meanings. I'm just going to do it because I think it's fun. So you can say, I never said you hit my car, or 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 I never said you hit my car. So it's a lot of fun and your student will enjoy it too. Okay, roll it is another one. You need to have a single die. You have 6 sentences on the left and you have 6 emotions with which you could read them on the right. So you roll the die to determine which sentence to read, and you roll it again to determine how you will read it. If you're in person, of course, you and your student can alternate rolling the die. Online, you'll need to be the one who rolls it. But you and your student can alternate until you've read all the sentences a variety of ways. So I am the tutor online and I'm rolling my die and I'm going to go first, and I rolled a 3 and a 5. So I will say, oh my goodness. I hope I sounded irritated. Sarah, rolling, rolling, rolling. Okay, it's a 2 and a 6.
And so I'm going to say that I'm, sad for number 2. You're kidding me.
But I rolled a 2 and a 6. How would you do it tired?
I don't know what happened. You can do this game any way you want. Okay. Guidelines for fluency instruction. There are 2 basic fluency rules. First, you should practice fluency after the student has already read the passage and you've checked for comprehension. At that point, the student has reviewed the vocabulary several times and is more familiar with the passage. This sets them up for success. We want them to win. The exception to this is with duet reading, when they're reading the text they've never seen before. Second, and this is really important, and I forget this sometimes, don't practice other things at the same time. Don't ask comprehension questions or ask a student to stop and decode a word. Reading fluently takes all of a student's concentration. Comprehension usually improves with more fluency, but you're not working on fluency and comprehension at the same time.
You're not. But there are surprises lurking here. I just want to tell you about a student I had once from Korea, a lovely young woman, and she could read surprisingly fluently, though she didn't use much expression. But it took me some time to realize that she understood very little of what she'd read. She sounded fine, but she had no idea what she was reading. In high school and college, English in Korea, it turns out, they just memorized English words and how to spell and pronounce them, but that was just about all they'd learned.
Oh, Catherine, I had the same problem with my Korean student, and they could read, but there was just, periods, exclamation points, none of those things meant anything. It was a real problem, a real learning experience for both of us.
And of course, they wouldn't mean anything if the student had no idea what the sentences meant.
Yeah. So we've got